You're listening to Oh My Health, There Is Hope podcast.
When your heart is aching and your world is shaking, don't give up. No, don't give up.
Hello and welcome to Oh My Health, There Is Hope, the podcast. I'm your host, Jana Short, and today we're here with Dr. Jaban Moore. Dr. J is, as he's known otherwise as Dr. J, is a DC located in Kansas City, Missouri. He works virtually with clients all around the world. At age 25, he went from being an award-winning top athlete in college to feeling like he couldn't even get out of bed. Dr. J went to a lot of appointments looking for answers, spent what felt like endless amounts of money on tests and appointments, but doctors only wanted to give him bandaids. He later was diagnosed with Lyme disease and dedicates his practice to helping clients get to the root cause of their chronic illness. Can I just say something, Dr. J? Like, honestly, I've heard this story. I've heard this story of spending tons of money, not being able to get a diagnosis. And I would say at 8 out of 10, it's Lyme disease.
Lyme disease is probably one of the most common chronic illness infections right now that we're seeing. And the story is one that I hear every single day. It's what all clients pretty much come to me for. And it's unfortunately, I think, becoming way more common than it used to be.
I think so too, but maybe more where you're at, because I live in Los Angeles. I don't think anybody here, I don't think we have a lot of Lyme disease here. I don't think that we not have it, but I don't think we get it as much as like East Coast or people where they have a lot of mountains and places that they would get. It comes from ticks, right?
Well, that's a misnomer for sure. It's ticks also, but it also comes from mosquitoes and fleas and mites. It can be passed down from mother to child. There is some consideration that some of these infections that are Lyme and co-infections can be passed even sexually. So there's a lot of ways you can get Lyme, and just beyond that, you may not get Lyme as much in LA, but you might get a lot of parasites or other types of infections out there because of different climates. But realistically, when it comes to parasites, we're eating food from all around the world, so you can get parasites from anywhere.
Well, thank you, because honestly, that's what I thought. So I'm really glad to hear that. One of the things that, first of all, thank you for being here. But one of the things we ask all of our guests is if they'll share a story of hope. And I have been doing some poking around into yours, and you have quite a story. So do you mind sharing with us?
I've got a lot of stories of hope when you ask a question like that, but I got one favorite one. I've got a guy that I've been working with for a little while. He came to my office. He's 30 years old. He had lost a ton of weight. He had electric shock migraines, head pain or headaches 24/7, could barely walk. He was actually using a walker at 30. He'd been all over the place. Had been to some of the really big popular medical clinics and had been diagnosed with a B6 toxicity, and that was it. And his uncle actually referred him to me saying he had neuropathy. And I was like, oh yeah, I see a lot of neuropathy. Guy walks in and he's emaciated. And just tremendous, like just rolling over in his bed caused this swooshing pain in his head. And everything he took caused reactions to his body, everything, medications, supplements, it didn't matter. He would just have reactions to it all. And he was able to, in our first year, because we worked together still, it's been 3 or 4 years. In the first year, we were able to figure out how to get his body kind of detoxing and draining and moving forward. And he went from unable to work, disabled, and married at 30 to now, because I don't want to give this huge long story, but now, like I talked to him a few weeks ago, he's slightly tired. Otherwise, he's living a normal life, working, talking about having a family. And this guy, he's a children's book writer. Like, he's got a lot of passion in life, and he was just a shell of himself. And it's because, he was passionate and able to work with me and trust me to take time. But he had Lyme disease because we did a blood draw and we found Lyme. He had parasites, and not to be too graphic, but again, he's a book writer. He likes a little scary book writing too. So he would measure what was coming out of him. He measured 300 feet of parasites that came out. And then on top of that, We've had to deal with the fact that he had mold in his bathtub. I mean, it seems like all the things that could create chronic illness all were in one with this guy. But, the story of hope is this: you can go from whatever level of sickness you're at. I mean, he was bedridden, in pain, about ready to give up on life, but he had faith enough to keep pushing, and family that wouldn't let him give up. And now he's talking about having kids himself and having a family. So never give up.
I absolutely love that story. I know that we were going to talk today a little bit about some of the stuff that you're educating on parasites. And for all of you who haven't, we're going to put his link to his Instagram page in here, because one of the reasons I reached out to you is you are a master educator, and you are like changing the way we see things and the way we learn things. So you guys have to check out his Instagram and some of his videos. They're amazing. But I wanted you to share a little bit on parasites, because everybody has parasites, and some of them we should have, but sometimes we have some that we picked up that like got on board somehow that we shouldn't have.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in the Western culture, we're like, oh, we don't have parasites. We're too good for parasites. And it's this thing that we don't want to talk about or think about. But if you have dogs, cats, horses, cows, whatever you have, you probably put them through a parasite cleanse once or twice a year. You do heart dewormers and different things. It's a normal thought. Why is it that we think that we can't then get those same parasites in our body or similar ones? Why are we so good that our bodies don't get them? Well, it's not because we're too clean, because you can get parasites from a lot of really easy places. You can get parasites from touching the dirt, from walking barefoot, going swimming in a lake, ocean, eating pork, eating raw other meats, having sushi. I mean, there's parasites literally everywhere. If you have an animal and you let that animal kiss you, or you let that animal roll around in your bed, you can get parasites. And there are millions of diagnoses of parasites in the United States every single year. So we are not invulnerable to parasites. So what a friend of mine always likes to say, so if you want to know if you have a parasite, take your 2 fingers, put them on your wrist. If you feel a beat there, then you could potentially have a parasite, and you probably do. So if you have a pulse, you have a parasite. It's just the same as we have gut bacteria too. We all do. It's a good thing, but we have the potential for bad bacteria too. So if you're dealing with chronic symptoms and you haven't found the answer, I'm always telling people, keep looking, and look in places maybe that you didn't know to look, like parasites.
So how do people start looking for those? Like, is there just, because there's so many different kinds that you can get, how do people start looking for parasites?
It's a really hard thing actually to look for, because there are so many kinds of parasites, and we have such poor testing for parasites, because again, we keep telling everyone in medicine that, well, have you been to a third world country? No, well, then you can't have parasites. So there hasn't been nearly as much research done. And then now that the world is so globalized, I mean, we are getting food from all around the world. So if you were going to run a test on parasites, you typically run one on what's close to you, what's potentially in the soil in your area. But now that we're eating fruit and veggies from Mexico, and herbs from India, and meat from who knows where, we're getting these parasites from around the world, and there's just too many to test for. Stool samples also don't catch most infections of parasites, because parasites have life cycles. So they're going to come out at specific times of their life cycle. They actually flare during the full moon. I have clients all the time telling me their symptoms are absolutely at their worst during the full moon. So track your symptoms if you're listening. And if you get worse during a full moon or a new moon, then it's very possible that you're dealing with parasites as a part of your healing journey to get well. So there isn't a great way to know if we're having it. Honestly, at this point, I'm to the point where I just say, hey, look, do a parasite protocol. If you see weird things in your stool, or if you feel better, or even if you have a detox reaction or a die-off reaction, which means that you can feel worse from taking parasite herbs, because when you kill these things, they want to release neurotoxins and say, stop, don't do that. Don't flush me out. So do a parasite protocol. Take it gentle, start if you're a sensitive person, but do a parasite protocol, just see what happens. That might, show you some things. I've got, like that story I told, he had 300 feet of parasites come out over a few months.
Do you have to be under a doctor's supervision to do a parasite protocol, especially if you're doing it gentle? Like I know there's some people who are all in and they're like, well, if 2 is good for me, 4 is better. And that's not necessarily the case. It actually can do you some harm. But do you have to be under a doctor's supervision to do that kind of protocol?
I always recommend consulting with whoever your health practitioner is so they can help guide you through this process, because like I was mentioning earlier, you definitely can have side effects. You can have some significant side effects if you're not doing it properly, not at least having some kind of guidance, because you do want to do some things to support your liver and take some binders which help bind those toxins that they can release, because parasites actually can pick up between 6 and 8 times the amount of their body weight in heavy metals and toxins as they are going through life. So if you kill a parasite and you're not getting it out, your body has to then be able to process that heavy metal and everything else out as you're getting better. So I do recommend consulting with a practitioner that you deem to be knowledgeable, and making sure that they know what they're doing with parasites too, because it could be something where your body doesn't necessarily like getting rid of those little guys.
I know this is going to sound really weird, but I travel all over the world all the time. And you pick up parasites just drinking water or washing your hands, brushing your teeth, swimming, like you said. Like there's tons of parasites in the water. It's part of the ecosystem for the water, but maybe not for us. But I always carry lemon oil and I put it in everything. I don't even know if it works, but in my head, it's helping.
I think that helps maybe your liver a little bit. I'm not sure how much it helps parasites, but there are some things you can do. So if you think about different cultures, right? So we go over to Japan and we think about, okay, what do they put with sushi? They put wasabi. Wasabi is a known antiparasitic. So you're eating sushi, which is a raw fish that's known to have parasites. And then you put with that wasabi, which is a known antiparasitic. So it's matched, and their culture did that so long ago that it's probably been lost. Why? But that's a piece of it. You go to Italy, where they put oregano all over everything. Well, what's oregano? It's one of the best antiparasitics in medicine. And you keep looking around at cultures and you start seeing that, curcumin, you look at these other types of different spices from even South America that are very popular. And a lot of them actually are antimicrobial in their nature. But then you come back to the United States and what do we put on everything? Salt and sugar. That's just going to help the parasites out. And then you wonder why 75% of our nation right now is dealing with a chronic health condition. 75% of people have something diagnosed that are in this country. That means the norm is being sick.
So you think that we can, and I totally agree with this, but that we can connect parasites to maybe like all the autoimmune diseases that are popping up? Because when I was growing up, like this just didn't exist. You'd see one person that might be diagnosed with something like that. Now it's like masses of people.
I think so. And not just parasites. So I think parasites are a huge part of it, but I think microbes in general, whether that be Candida yeast, Lyme disease, molds, or parasites, I think the combination of those things can get into your body and they can trigger you to have autoimmunity because they trigger your immune system. And one way that we do see this is I've become a bit of a nerd when it comes to a condition called PANS and PANDAS, which is a autoimmune encephalitis of children. And it's triggered most notably by strep. So Streptococcus bacteria. And what the strep does is it grabs a small portion of your DNA and it sticks a little piece of that DNA out on its own receptors on the bacteria. So it's hiding behind your DNA. So your body looks at it and goes, oh, nope, that's me. Oh, nope, that's me. But your body keeps being sick and it doesn't know why. So it gets a little bit more investigative. So then when it goes to attack that bacteria, it not only tags the bacteria as being bad, but it tags that tissue type as being bad. So if that's part of your skin or brain or joint, now you have an autoimmunity to that tissue and the infection. So we know now in science that infections can use your own body to create molecular mimicry, where your body will attack itself, called autoimmunity. So then, yeah, these infections are definitely playing a role in autoimmunity. And the more knowledge we get, the more research that is done, we're finding out more and more that, hey, that autoimmunity is not autoimmunity. That autoimmunity is mycoplasma, or something that's very small, something maybe we didn't even know about. Maybe it's another virus that is unknown to us that is causing these, quote unquote, autoimmune reactions, because the body's intelligent when it's left to be healthy, but it's under the constraints of the toxic environment and infections that it becomes to where it can't differentiate between us and these toxic infectious burdens.
I love that. By the way, when I was reading in your bio, I saw pants and pandas and I had no idea what it was. Like none. Like it probably wasn't given a name when I was raising my children, because now I'm in the grandchildren phase, but I had never heard of it before.
It came about in 2012 with Dr. Sweeto, who was a researcher at the NIH for autism. And she kept seeing something happening. And it was this onset of, honestly, in some cases, autism-like behaviors, not all cases. It can be a large number of different symptoms, for anything from OCD to tics to rage to depression, even regression in ability at school. So handwriting and other things. There's a large number of symptoms, but it's an onset right after an infection. So that infection, like strep, for instance, creates an immune reaction to the basal ganglia, which is a part of your brain. And that reaction is then followed by inflammation that then continues in keeping these kids sick with symptoms long after the infection, like autoimmunity that you were talking about. This is just happens to be first of all, discovered, documented, researched autoimmunity to a part of the brain that's triggering neurological symptoms that we know is not actually just because it happens, it's because of an infection.
Is there a treatment for that? Is there a plan? Because it's so new, is there a way to reverse that? If we catch it?
I work a ton with these kids in my clinic, and we have some really great success getting them well. And at this point, I'm starting to wonder in general, and I've got some opinions on this, but it's a little early for me to give too many of those opinions because I'm still compiling some research. But are a lot of neurological depression, anxiety, even in adults, actually side effects of these infections, which I think yes, but because we're having a lot of success getting rid of those things in people without ever having talk therapy, without ever doing these other things, but just by removing the toxins and infections. But for PANS and PANDAS, there's the Western med route, which is IV of antibiotics, IVIG, sometimes plasmapheresis. So basically it's either kill the bug, decrease the inflammation, or wipe out your immune system is what Western medicine right now is trying to do. And there's some success in that. But there's a lot of people that just didn't work because it didn't get to the root of it. And what I found is took 100 clients, just for the 100 that came in a row. And about 70% of the ones that we ran mold testing on were positive. Wow. So mold is actually playing a big role in PANS PANDAS that I can find, especially in the people where antibiotics and these other measurements did not work. Because I'll be honest, most people are going to go with their insurance and go through the Western Med in the hospital because their kids have this huge flare and they're just like, what's happening? So they go through that whole route before they ever make it to my clinic. And then once they've made it to my clinic, they've already done the Western Med route. It didn't work for them. So now there's something else keeping this situation perpetuated. And mold seems to be a big piece, but parasites are another huge piece, because with parasites, a lot of these parents have never treated or known or even looked at parasites as being an option. And after we go through some protocols to optimize the body, decrease the parasites threshold, guess what happens? The kids get better.
I love that. One of the things that you just mentioned, I have a lot of doctors that come on here and they always say the same thing, getting to the root cause. And that's kind of the holistic side of medicine. But they're like, what's the difference if I take a pill and the symptom goes away? Aren't I better? And I try to explain to people, not necessarily. If you haven't gotten to the root cause, it's still there. It might be laying dormant. You may not have a symptom from it until you do again. When you talk about getting to the root cause, is that what you're talking about as well? Like really finding out what is causing these symptoms and alleviating that root cause instead of giving it the pill to just get rid of the symptom for a time.
Oh, for sure. I tell people all the time, my goal when you walk out of my clinic is for you to be able to be well and not have to be on anything.
Oh.
I mean, that's the goal, right? Now, there are different levels that people walk out at. You know, if you've had Lyme for 50 years, there might be some things that have just been damaged. If you have a new autoimmune trigger and that autoimmune trigger goes up under stress, you may have to either learn how to control your stress, because sometimes shutting off that switch is pretty hard. But my goal is always that you come in and by the time you leave, you are on nothing besides just a general healthy lifestyle. Because if you have to stay on a pill, whether that's for blood pressure, anxiety, or otherwise, but then you say you feel good, there's still something wrong because your body isn't deficient of whatever that medication is. It's because it's holding your physiology in check because there's a problem with something triggering your physiology to be wrong. And the biggest thing that I tell people is like, look, you might feel good right now, but the fact that you still have something wrong tells me that there's something wearing on you. And if you walk out into my gym and I put a 45-pound bar on your back and I say, go for a walk, at some point that 45-degree bar is going to wear you out, even if it's not right now. So that infection might not be too high, or that toxic burden on your body might not be super high, which is why you can get away with just 1 or 2 pills. But eventually you're going to wear out, and those 1 or 2 pills is going to turn into 4, 6, or 8. And then eventually it's just not enough, because those things all have these different reactions with each other. And you're going to feel like crap at some point if you don't get to your root cause.
That was a really great way of describing it, because people just think that I feel better, so I must be better. And sometimes you are, but if it's a chronic thing, that is just covering the symptom up and making that symptom go away. So thank you. The last thing I really want you to talk about, and I don't think we even talked about you talking about this, but I've seen so much amazing stuff on your Instagram page and you talking about gut health. And by the way, I think it ties all of the things that you've been talking in, because our gut, I say it all the time, is our second brain. And honestly, its job is just as important as our beautiful minds as far as functioning in the way your body functions.
Yeah, you know, the second brain comment, I love that. And it came from the fact that at this point, they think that there might be more nerve endings, so more nervous tissue associated with the gut than actually in your brain.
Oh.
So I've seen some studies talking about that. I don't know where they've landed in that yet, but the gut. So let's talk about this. You breathe, and whatever you're breathing in is going in through your mouth and through down into your lungs, but part of that's the mouth. So the gut is technically the tissue from your mouth all the way to your colon and out into the rectum to where you go poop. So 70% of your immune system is tasked to protect your gut, because we know you could be getting parasites. You could be getting lots of toxicity throughout that. You have bacteria in there, all of your microbes. There's 40,000 bacteria now discovered that are technically named. They might be named letters or numbers or who knows what combination, but in your gut. So your gut has so many operations. Without your gut microbes being healthy, your gut will fall apart. It will break down. Without your gut microbes being healthy, it won't repair itself. It won't help make neurotransmitters or digest properly. So you've got to have this immune self microbe combination in operation, like it's a symphony. Like they got to be able to play together. Otherwise, nothing works right. So the gut is an incredible, huge piece. That's why everybody's talking about the gut. That's why it's so popular. Parasites can wreck it. I know that if we do metal detoxes or mold detoxes and you don't get binders in there enough, that can cause a lot of dysbiosis and just pain and bloating because you're disrupting the gut. Your liver has to function properly for the gut to work. I mean, the gut has connections to everything. And if you're not absorbing properly, you're not getting enough food in, you don't have the building blocks to rebuild any of the rest of your body. So health has to be at the forefront of what we talk about.
I love it. Dr. J, can you tell everyone where they can get some more of this information? And I'm not sure when, we were just talking about when the podcast would release, but I know you have a workshop coming out for parasites. Where can people go and find your Instagram, your website, learn more, and start getting some of this great education that you're doing online?
Yeah, so I have a Facebook page, website, and a Instagram account, all of them that are creatively named Dr. Jaban Moore. And
remember that.
Yeah, I was like, I'm not very creative. I named everything the exact same. So you can find me there, whether on whatever format you want to find it. And then we're releasing the Parasite Summit, which is coming out in October 4th through 10th. But there won't be links or anything to really find it up until August. But if you wanted to go to Health Talks, which is the website that it'll be launched from right now, you can click it and then just put in your email and it'll send you an email when it's time for it to release.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing all that amazing information. I sure hope you come back, especially when you're getting closer to your parasite course, because I feel like we all could take a note or two from that, especially for me. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this.
Thanks for listening to the Oh My Health, There Is Hope podcast. Make sure to visit Jana's website, bestholisticlife.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Google Play, or listen there, so you'll never miss an episode. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if you simply tell a friend about the show. That'll help too. Let's change the world together, one health expert at a time. Looking forward to seeing you next time.